Chapter 18. More ghost, Amy? What in the world? Aunt Claire sounded stunned. Lightning filled the room with blue light as she blinked at the figures clutching each other at the foot of her bed. Who's there? What's happening? In the attic, we saw thunder drowned out Amy's stammer. Aunt Claire flicked on the lamp and swung her feet over the side of the bed. Wait a minute, she commanded, though not quite with her usual vigor. The pill had put it to sleep in spite of the storm, and obviously she was having difficulty waking up now. Do you mean you've been in the attic again? We had to. Amy saw her aunt's lips tighten. We did it for you, Aunt Claire. Don't be angry. We saw, but the words wouldn't come out. Aunt Claire reached for her robe. I'm not angry, Amy. I just don't understand what you're trying to tell me. Good grief, what a storm. Let's go downstairs. Maybe I can hear you better down there. Meekly, the girls followed along in the hall to the stairs. Amy darted a glance at the attic door. It was closed. I wouldn't go up there, she thought, for all the secrets in the world. The lightning lit their way and thunder bombarded them as they trailed into the kitchen. I'll make cocoa, Aunt Claire said. It'll calm you down. She combined chocolate, sugar, and milk while the girls huddled near the door. You may have noticed I'm a firm believer in the soothing powers of a snack, though of course doctors don't approve of using food for comfort. In my experience, though, chocolate never fails. Chocolate chip cookies are also very useful, and fudge and cocoa. She kept glancing at the girls as she chattered. I'll pull the shades if you'd like. A storm makes everything seem much worse than they are. The words flowed over Amy. If my legs would only stop shaking, she thought, if my chest didn't feel so funny and tight. Aunt Claire gave up the attempt at conversation. You both better sit down before you fall down, she suggested. Amy moved toward the table, and Luann followed. Just then, another clap of thunder crashed over them, rattling dishes in the cupboards. The room was plunged into darkness, and Luann squealed in terror. Darn, they could hear Aunt Claire moving across the kitchen. Stay where you are, kids. There's an oil lamp on the top shelf of the cupboard. I'll have it on in a minute. Amy couldn't have taken a step if she wanted to. With the lights out, the terror she felt in the attic returned with full force. Beside her, Luann sobbed, her panic increasing with each clap of thunder. Amy put an arm around her sister's shoulder and drew her close. There now. A match flared, and the yellow light brightened the kitchen. Aunt Claire turned up the flame of the light. That's cozy, isn't it? She lifted the pot from the stove and poured cocoa into the mugs. Come on now, don't cry, Luann. Have a nice hot drink and tell me what scared you so. More ghost, Amy? The question was put lightly, but Amy heard the tension behind it. They were back to that dangerous subject again. There was no escaping it. Amy sipped her cocoa and tried not to look at the shadows beyond the lamplight. We saw a doll move, she began cautiously, all by itself, and we heard things too. When her aunt didn't stop her, she described what happened in the attic a few minutes earlier. Aunt Claire regarded her solemnly. You sure, Amy? You couldn't have imagined the crying or the footsteps? Oh, no. And you heard it too, Luann? And there was thunder all the time, Luann said, feeling clearly that Amy had left out something important, just like now. For her, the storm remained the most frightening part of the night. Aunt Claire leaned forward and rested her chin on her hands. Her face was gaunt. Then it's true, she said. There really is something up there, something angry and full of hate after all these years. Amy squirmed. What do you mean? If there's a spirit haunting this place, Aunt Claire spoke slowly, I'm sure it's Grandma Treelor's. She was the strong one, and she hated Tom so much and despised me for loving him. And now she wants to make me suffer because I brought him into their lives, and I caused their deaths. Her voice broke. Maybe not, Amy protested. Maybe that isn't it. But she did think Aunt Claire was right. It could be that the ghost wants to tell us something else, something about the books in the parlor, she went on, the idea taking shape as she spoke. Last night, the grandma doll was in the parlor and the books started sliding out of the shelves. We didn't understand what it meant, and so tonight she leaned forward and she touched them, first one, then another. Do you think maybe? She and Aunt Claire stared at each other, wide-eyed. Aunt Claire stood and picked up the lamp. Well, we can find out, she said grimly. I may regret it, but we have to look, don't we? Look at what? Luann clutched her cocoa mug. The books in the parlor, Amy explained. Maybe Grandma Treelor's spirit was using the doll to tell us there was something hidden behind the books. Come on, Luann. We'll close the curtains in the parlor so you can't see the lightning. Reluctantly, Luann stood up. The little procession made its way down the hall, Aunt Claire leading the way with a lamp. Amy shivered as they entered the parlor. There was a chilling dampness that she had never noticed before. Aunt Claire set the lamp on the table and went from window to window, closing the velvet draperies. Then she pointed to the bookshelves. Amy, you stand in front of the shelves and put your hand up the way the doll did in the dollhouse. Grandma Treelor wasn't very tall. Her voice shook. I can't believe we're doing this. People would think we were absolutely insane. Amy loosened Luann's grip on her arm and positioned herself in front of the shelves. She was still terrified, but for the first time she felt as if she might be close to learning the secret of the haunted dollhouse. She raised her hand and ran her fingertips over a row of books. Take them out, one or two at a time, Aunt Claire suggested. There could be something behind them, I guess. I'm sure those books haven't been touched in 30 years. Amy pulled out 4 books and sneezed as a cloud of dust drifted over her head. She slid her hand into the empty space. Nothing, she reported. Aunt Claire put the books on the side table. Take out some more. Let's empty that shelf and the one above it. Amy pulled out another handful of books and another. She emptied the first shelf and started on the second. The table filled up, and Luann carried some of the books to the sofa. Let's stop for a while and look through these, Aunt Claire said. Her face was so white that she looked like a ghost herself. There might be something tucked in the pages between, I guess. Oh, I feel ridiculous and afraid of what we might find. Luann gathered up more books from the table just as a tremendous thunderclap broke overhead. The books flew out of her hand and she sank to the floor. Make it go away, she moaned. Make it stop, Amy. I can't. Amy knew Luann was trying hard to be brave. At home, she often became hysterical during severe thunderstorms. Come on, pick up the books, Luann. You're a good helper. Luann rubbed her eyes with her fist and did as she was told. Books, 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 she muttered. Books, books, all over the floor. Books and a letter. A letter? Amy turned from the bookcase. Her sister was looking at a sheet of paper with irritation. It was in the book, Luann said. It fell out. I didn't do it. Amy snatched the paper from Luann's fingers and held it close to the lamp. A bookmark, maybe? Aunt Claire suggested. She leaned across the table for a better look and then straightened up with a gasp. That's Grandma Treelor's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. Oh, Amy. She closed her eyes and turned away. You read it, please. I can't bear to. Amy's hand trembled so much that she could hardly make out the words scrawled on the paper. He killed James, she read huskily. He wants money. He's going to kill me too. We've always been generous to Reuben. How could he do this? Please, God, don't let Paul wake up. And that was all. Amy looked up at her aunt, who clung to the edge of the table as if she might faint. Who's Reuben? Aunt Claire cleared her throat. Let me see the note, Amy, please. She held the paper close to the lamp and read it again. Reuben Miller was the handyman who took care of the garden and did chores around the house, she said. He worked for a number of other people, too. He was quiet, serious, and very dependable. She began to cry. Reuben Miller. Oh, Amy, I know the police questioned him at the time, but he seemed so outraged by the killings, and his wife swore he was home that evening. Where is he now? He died long ago. Aunt Claire dropped into a chair and leaned back. I just can't take it in. Do you know what this means? Tom didn't kill Grandma and Grandpa. It wasn't my fault they died. Amy watched her aunt study the message again. Something magic was happening. A small miracle in the circle of a yellow lamplight. Tiny little lines in Aunt Claire's face melted away, and her pale cheeks flushed with color. She looked younger, gentler, prettier than Amy had ever seen before. When you said there was a ghost, I was angry with you, Amy, she murmured. I thought, if that's true, the ghost is Grandma Treelor, and she's still furious after all these years because her killer was never identified. I thought she wants me to go on feeling guilty forever. But now I know Tom didn't kill them, and Grandma Treelor wanted me to know the truth. If her spirit has come back, it's because she wants me to stop driving myself crazy over something that wasn't my fault at all. She was like a little girl, thrilled and relieved, asking Amy and Luann to be happy with her. Do you think that's why she came back? I think the thunder is stopping, Luann replied. That's what I think. She turned from Aunt Claire to Amy, and they burst out laughing. "Not funny," she scolded. "The thunder's bad." The electricity came on, and they returned to the kitchen. In the bright light, Aunt Claire read Grandma Treelor's note still another time. When she put it down at last, Luann picked it up from the table and slipped it inside the book that she brought from the parlor with her. "It belongs here in this book," she said primly. "This is the book it fell out of." She laid the thin volume of the tape on the table with a satisfied air. Amy stared at the book and then at Aunt Claire. "I can't believe it," Aunt Claire said, shaking her head. "It's just a wild coincidence. Grandma must have grabbed the first book she touched." Amy nodded. After all, everything about this evening had been hard to believe. But she picked up the book and ran her fingers across the cover. "A play by Henrik Ibsen," it said at the cross of the binding, and in large letters the title, "A Doll's House."